わさびアニメすごいですね。
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Trey Davis. I am one of the owners of an upcoming manga store here in Jacksonville called the Neon Otaku. And this is a panel called Manga Versus. We're going to be comparing and contrasting the medium of manga to other mediums of entertainment. And today, joining me is.
My name is Dominique Hatcher. I run a kind of a geek media news website slash blog page called the Geek Mansion. I'm obviously based out of Jacksonville, Florida, and yeah, we're gonna talk manga today.
All right, awesome. And then I guess so. How we're going to be doing this is we'll kind of be going through like three kind of separate points in this conversation. And just disclaimer: we're not professionals. This isn't really educational. This is
No,
just
not
us
at
sitting
all.
around the water cooler having a conversation about how we feel. And so this first portion is going to be about manga versus Western comic books, and we'll kind of be generalizing it because like certain comic books, certain manga are different from each other. But
Right,
we'll just be doing general comparisons of like say Marvel and DC comics versus Shonen Jump comics. It'll be more general conversation like that.
right,
Then afterwards, we'll be transitioning to how it goes mainly against Western TV and movies, some anime adaptations here and there of like live action anime adaptations. That should be fun. And then and then we're gonna kind of close it with manga versus its own anime adaptations. And so I guess before we get started, so what would you say is like just off the top of your head, what are some of your favorite like manga? We'll start with that.
Well, as far as manga, I mean, I hit all the, I guess, the typical classics. I've dabbled in. Well, Gantz is actually one of my favorite. Like
Ooh, that is a good choice.
I love
Yeah.
Gantz. But I come from mainly, I guess, an anime first background. So most of the manga I'm into are because of the anime I saw initially. So
Mhm.
of course, I've read Inuyasha. I've read some Bleach. I've read some Naruto because of my brothers. My little brothers are into manga way more than me, but so I've hit those. My brother's been trying to push me on Attack on Titan, both the manga and the anime. I couldn't get far into the anime for well, I mean, I liked it, but how it
Okay.
goes. I don't want to spoil anything, but I mean, pretty much the top ones, Yu Yu Hakusho, you know,
Yes, yes.
all of
Nice.
those I pretty much dabbled in. But if I had to pick one as my favorite, Gantz right now is at the top of that list.
Nice. I guess for me, uh it's One Piece. And like you always hear people saying, "Oh man, One Piece is so good," or whatever. And you see the chapter count, it's almost at 1,000. And I was
Right.
like that for like I dabbled in it. I'd seen some episodes of the anime. I unfortunately saw the Four Kids dub when I was little, and so that also kind of turned me off of it for a while.
See,
But like not too long ago, I finally like, and my friends always talked about One Piece, so I knew some things that happened. But I finally like earlier this year sat down and just read all of One Piece.
see,
One Piece so far, it's worth
um,
it. I
yeah.
I hate to admit it, they were right.
But
All
see,
those times.
One Piece kind of got me the way like I've wanted to get into JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and it's just the sheer volume of it. It
Mm,
can be a little daunting because of
yeah.
how much there is there. So it's like you kind of keep it like I'm gonna get into that one day, and
Hmm.
you found your one day, so I applaud you for that because yeah,
Hmm.
that's no easy task.
It's I've had a lot of one days happen this year because of COVID. I was
Yeah,
like, I ain't got nothing better to do. I should stop procrastinating on Black Clover. And so I read Black
yeah.
Clover, and I was pleasantly surprised. I was not expecting. Like I know some fans might be mad at me. I was not expecting much at first from what I heard about Black Clover, from little things I saw. I'm like, I don't know if this is for me, but I'm opening a manga store. Let me give it a fair shot. And then I did.
Makes
I
sense.
Wow, especially the later arcs. I was really impressed. And so those have been some of my favorites. And I guess now to switch it, what have been some of your favorite like comic books, either comic books, Marvel, DC, graphic novels, all of those kind of count. Just like off the top of your head, what are some like really memorable comic books and whatnot that you that mean a lot to you?
Well, I've always been more of a Marvel head than a DC
Mhm.
head. Like even because my dad used to collect comic books and he had more Marvel than anything. So we would just pour through like the old volumes, Journeys and Mystery and
Mhm.
Weird Tales and all of that. But I was actually just tweeting about this with my brother the other day. Like what I'm into Jonathan Hickman's run on X-Men right now.
Ooh.
He started it with the Powers of X, House of X, and it's this new
Mhm.
relaunch called Dawn of X. And it's the world building and just the depth and the layers and the callbacks to almost 60, 70 years of continuity, like the way they've melded it all together, it's really got me. And that's the one kind of comic book kind of line or series or a group of series that I find myself reading like every issue as soon as I can get my hand on it. So that's really big for me right now. But of course, again, I want to go back to the classics. I'm a huge fan of Peter David's initial run in The Incredible Hulk. That's honestly one of my top favorite comic book anything ever. I was a fan of the Clone Saga for Spider-Man, and like some fans, there's some controversy with how that was resolved. I like the first half, but
Yeah,
I
I can
mean,
agree with
again, I also like what they're doing with Venom right now, with the whole Null, God of the Symbiotes. Yeah, that whole thing's beating me too. So those are kind of the recent ones that have really gotten me, the Venom and X-Men right now.
I have like I really just haven't been as deep into comic books. Like comic books and whatnot have always been the once in a while kind of thing. Like I'll go through and like I'll read a bunch of series. I usually find myself reading more DC, and then like I like all the classics. Like I have one here with me. Actually, I really like the way, I'm sure a lot of people will
Yeah,
recognize this.
love
I
the Marvel stuff.
love this art
Yeah,
just so much. And then of course, a lot of times, because with a lot of comic books, after the initial issues come out, and like they kind of get like compilations later, such
yeah,
as
yeah, yeah,
Watchmen.
yeah,
It was like one at a time, then it was like kind of
yeah.
put into one big thing later. I tend to do that a lot, and I did that with like the recent Batman Who Laughs, Deceased. I like that one, and then just like a few others like that. But one of a series that from Marvel
Yeah.
that really surprised me, because I'm not going to get into it here, but a lot of people haven't really liked the recent direction of a lot of the younger Marvel stuff.
Yeah.
But the Unbelievable Gwenpool, this
Yes,
comic run is
I'm a fan.
amazing. Gwenpool Strikes Back, I don't acknowledge, but and then of course I realized, like, when I was halfway through the series, oh man, no wonder I like this, because Guruhiru, Japanese artists.
See,
That's why the series, to me at least, just looks so gorgeous most of the
all
time,
comes
because
together.
they switch up. We'll get up to this in a second. And so yeah, those are just kind of some of our manga picks and comic book picks. I mostly stick with DC with comics. With manga, as I'm sure you all can pick up from our conversation a little bit ago, read a lot of shonen, but I also really like shojo. I don't know why. Like supernatural romance specifically, it just speaks to me so much, and I don't know why. So
See, I can vibe with that. Like I found myself enjoying a few. I'm not as into the shojo shonen. There are a few though that I take exception to, and yeah, they do speak to you sometimes. So yeah, there's
Mhm.
fine.
Yep, and then of course seinen like Berserk and whatnot. But now to kind of get into the discussion, so manga versus comic books.
Right.
Just off the top of your head, it can be a loose explanation or answer if you want. But what would you say are kind of like the different appeals of each? Like, what's the biggest appeal of manga that Western comics just don't have, and vice versa?
I think, well, like that's a very multi-pronged question, but
Yeah.
just some things that I've noticed is like, just for me being a fan and coming into it is, anything that comes from Japan is just so they drench their culture in it. Like it
Mhm.
drips their culture, no matter what it is, TV, live action, video game, food, it doesn't matter. So if you're already a fan of comic books in America and then you discover Japanese comic books, half of the appeal is already there. It's a
Yeah.
comic book from somewhere else.
Mhm.
And it's just some of those little nuances like you watch like an anime and read a manga, it's like Ronin Warriors, and it has the Japanese samurai kind of aesthetic to it, but then it also has Japan's interpretation of Christianity, something that's considered typically Western. So when you
Mhm.
have that, it's like it scratches all these itches at once.
Yeah.
There's familiar things, but it's filtered through the lens of someone else's culture. And when you're a kid, Japan, you think, oh, samurai, ninjas, Ani and all this stuff. So when you filter things that we have in America through that, it kind of makes it cooler, I guess. And it
Yeah,
just that kind of helps that appeal with it. So I think that's a huge part of it.
gotcha. For me, I think one of the most immediate differences is obviously the aesthetic, the general look. Because manga, it's super stylized,
Yes,
hairstyles you would never see in real life.
correct.
Everyone points that out and whatnot. And when I look at a comic, when I'm reading a Flash comic, I'm like, yeah, these are people I could see. I'm a little bit closer to powers and everything, but I could see my eyes actually seeing the appeal, like the appearance of those people.
Right.
Like, they look like kind of more regular people.
Yeah.
That's easier to achieve with cosplay than it is like Gon with his hair from Hunter x Hunter.
Right.
So
Right. No, you're
uh,
absolutely right.
that's kind of one of the more immediate things. And kind of jumping off that, it's the way comic books and manga are made in the first place, like the process they go through. So a good example right here is, so like the main two people that worked on this, written by Christopher Hastings, a lot of the art by Gurihiru, but sometimes like a different writer or a different artist will take over for a certain issue of the same
Right.
series.
Right.
And even if it still looks good, for me that's always just been a little bit jarring for me, jumping from one
Yeah.
art style to the other.
It takes you
And
out just a little bit.
exactly. And like I get why they do it, because in that Japanese art style, it's hard to imagine seeing the chapter with Blade, where Blade shows up for a little bit in that kind of anime art style. So
Right.
it was like a different art style for that chapter. But uh with manga, yeah, the mangaka, the authors, like have assistants from time to time, but a lot
Right.
of times it really is just mostly them, and it's like
Right.
their kind of story, their kind of artwork, and whatnot. And like you'll have some people like do storyboards or just like inking and things like that,
Right.
but it's usually much more consistent.
Right.
Even if there are assistants, it's the same team
Correct.
working on each one. And so like Death Note feels extremely consistent. It was two people, one mainly writing, one doing the art. But you read all that, the art style never looks different. It always
And it's
looks the
easy,
same.
yeah.
And
It's much easier to keep you locked in when there's, like you said, that consistency. Where it's like you said, when you switch artists halfway through an arc, especially if their styles are, if the juxtaposition is a little bit more jarring than it normally is, then yeah, it can kind of take you out of it. But when you have that consistency in manga, it's like you can turn that part of your brain off and just fully immerse yourself in what you're reading.
yep. And then one of the biggest things for me is it's so much easier to just pick manga is much easier to pick up and read currently than comic books,
Yeah.
because there's all these different series going on with the same characters in DC. Like, unless you're really like kind of doing your homework and keeping up, you might get lost. It's like, what does Batman White Knight have to do with Dark Knight's Metal,
Right.
or just things like that. And it's really easy, especially as an outsider, to get confused with manga. uh oh, hey, this is My Hero volume number 4. I know exactly where I am, and I just keep reading from there. And um that's why, luckily, I'm already kind of into comics, so I'm still able to enjoy those stories.
Yeah.
But it's also, when a series is going, it's just like those series of characters, just like kind of a linear story going
Right.
until it ends, and then you move on. And with, say, DC, for I keep bringing up DC. I'm sorry. I guess I'm
No,
just
you're fine.
a DC
Look, I'm the
fanboy
Marvel
after all.
guy. You're DC. It's fine. We can do this.
But like DC's strategy, which actually has its own advantages, is it's a bunch of different miniseries
Right.
going on. And so like what's happening in this miniseries is like a different universe from that miniseries. And while yes, that can be confusing, at the very least, if one series is in an arc I don't care about, I can just jump to another that I find more interesting, and not
That's yeah.
have to do a bunch of
Yeah.
other stuff
That's
before that.
better.
So
That's better.
because there have been times, I hate to say it, JoJo, like I'm sure some JoJo fans might get mad at me. It's a good series. I'd recommend it overall. But there are some parts like I wish I could just skip. I wish I could just skip this part and go to the next, but I know I'll be confused. I won't know who this and
See,
this are.
that's one of the things I've heard as well, and that's one of those kind of should I jump in? Should I not? Am I prepared for this? Like, yeah,
Because like I think with maybe a couple of parts you could skip if you really don't like them, but it's also everyone has so many conflicting opinions on that series. Some
Oh
people
yeah.
love part 5, some people hate it, things like that. So
Yeah,
it,
don't ask for advice on JoJo if you're thinking about hopping in. You're just gonna have to take the plunge. Decide for yourself to take the plunge
yeah,
at some point.
yep, it's gonna be your tastes; those will guide you.
That's it.
Hopefully, it doesn't burn you right at the start. But and I guess to kind of transition what we mentioned earlier with art style
Yeah,
is now we're going to kind of transition to TV and like manga versus TV and movies.
right.
But a kind of a conversation, a thing I want to ask you is why do you think that comic book movies are able to work well, make billions at the box office, but depending on who you're asking, we haven't really had a good like anime or manga adaptation yet, like a Hollywood or Japanese live action adaptation.
Uh, I think, well, as far as there have been some recent
Mhm.
Japanese manga live action adaptations that I think were done pretty well. The Blade of the Immortal one, I actually enjoyed. The Attack on Titan, I saw the first one. I haven't seen the second part yet.
Mm,
I don't really, since I haven't dived into the series or the manga deep yet, I don't really have a good litmus for that like some people would.
mhm,
But I think they're figuring it out, or at least they're putting an honest effort towards trying. When it
mhm,
comes to English language adaptations of manga, I mean, the first obvious thing is they're trying to change too much too fast.
mhm,
And then they change key things, and it seems like it's small. Like I'll bring up, since we're getting into this, Ghost in the Shell, the one with Scarlett Johansson. Aesthetically, it was as good as you could hope for, I guess, for live action. But then those certain key things they changed about the narrative, it made sense, but it's not what we know. It's not
mhm.
what made the original popular in the first place.
Yep, it's
Same
not
thing
really.
with that Akira movie they're trying to, get off the ground for like 15, 20 years. They keep trying to change too much about it. So, look at Dragon Ball Evolution. On
Mm,
paper, that movie should have been gangbusters, but it wasn't because again they changed too much. So that's the biggest thing. They're not respecting, they're not trusting that the audience is gonna respond if they just translate from manga to screen with minimal changing. They're not
mm,
trusting the audience that they're gonna flock to it. So that's the biggest thing in my opinion.
yeah, I so obviously a big thing is culture, right? A lot of the culture depicted in Western comic books, it's different,
Yeah,
and like it's something we know, and because it's something that's easier for Hollywood to adapt because it's the culture Hollywood lives in. It's the culture
right.
we live in, no matter what state you're in. With Japan, like you mentioned earlier, there's a lot about Japanese culture that, of course, seeps into the work of manga as well. So, for example, like One Piece, one of the arc it's currently in, it's based on feudal Japan, and there's a lot of just really interesting piece of Japanese history kind of inserted into that, and it's because and it's a fine line to walk where when it comes to Hollywood adaptations at least where you want, like you said, to respect what made the original good, but also not try to make McDonald's sushi. Uh,
Yes. I mean, couldn't have put it more succinctly than that. Like that's it. I mean,
mhm,
it's you, and it's weird and it's funny that it goes that way because when you think about it, there's technically, if you just look back at manga, there's kind of that two, I guess, two types. You've got like the manga that kind of is based more on like pre-war,
mhm,
it's more Meiji era inspired, but then you've also got, post-war where they were under American occupation and that those Disney influences and that
mhm,
Western animation influence kind of creeped in and started influencing. I mean, we wouldn't have Astro Boy if it wasn't for Walt Disney, technically, kind of. So it's like you see that Western influence on early manga, which then influenced early anime, which is turning around and influencing
mhm,
modern comic books and modern media. But it's like you shouldn't. They should have more faith in it because what we think of as manga, definitely manga, was so influenced by Western culture. Then some of the things, more things are going to get picked up on and translate over than you think if you
mhm.
just give it a chance to.
Yeah. And I'm going to say something that's possibly controversial. But I think eventually, because in my personal opinion, I liked Edge of Tomorrow. Edge of Tomorrow, it's so all you need is skill started out as a novel, then it got a
Yes.
manga.
Yes.
Manga is what a lot of people the manga is what a lot of people are familiar with.
I read the book.
And then the movie, which was Live Die Repeat, Edge of Tomorrow, whatever that was.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna pull up. That's close enough. I'll consider a
I
manga adaptation, but I think that's like the best one we've had so far. But I
I can
didn't hate Ghost in the Shell,
right.
but like it wasn't. If you're gonna adapt something as legendary as Ghost in the Shell, good enough isn't good enough.
Correct.
So,
And
and
that's
then
it.
and so my unpopular opinion is I think we will eventually get to a point where we could possibly consistently see good live action adaptations of manga. And
Right.
why I think of that is because I also think of the history of comic book movies. It took like 40 years
It
for
did.
us to start getting
Yo,
consistent, like good
I
like live action comic book entertainment. And of
I
course,
mean,
like
yeah.
there's still the cultural barrier to cross, but it's like you mentioned, like there's already a little bit of American kind of influence in some of those series anyway. So yeah, I think eventually we can get to a point where we might see like we might see better adaptations of it. But currently from Japan and America, I'm not a fan of most of the adaptations. So I think at the very least, Japan will get to a point where they're, in my opinion, putting out better adaptations of manga as well. So I think it just takes time. It
Yeah,
takes really kind of treading those waters for a while.
absolutely.
So
So I mean, I think for the longest time we only had like, the only good comic movies we had were Batman and Superman related. And then,
mhm,
it took a while for that to change. So yeah,
yeah.
manga, anime in Japan's no different.
Eventually, we had Blade,
Yeah,
one and two at least. We're not going to acknowledge Infinity, but
I think anybody does, to be honest.
and then Kevin Feige really kind of cracked the formula when he started the MCU, and
Yep.
so and like the rest has been history. But yeah, and so I guess now the next thing to move on to, like in term, so now that we're talking about uh kind of like different adaptations of manga, let's go ahead and move to anime
Yeah.
because yeah, like anime is the closest you're going to get to manga outside of the manga medium itself.
Correct.
But there's still just been a kind of consistent thing where in a perfect world, you know, you would think, okay, manga, it's just black and white. It's like weekly and monthly chapters or whatever. And anime, has color, it has voice acting, it has music, it has like animation and movement and all that stuff. In like kind of an ideal world on paper, we probably would be at a point where most people would say, yeah, why would I read the manga when I can just watch the anime unless I want to, be ahead in the story?
Right.
But even to this day, we're like the community is still in a lot of discussions on what like the fact that there's still a discussion where people are still actively arguing which's better, manga or the anime, I think is a really interesting point in it of itself. And so, what, in your opinion, what do you think makes an anime adaptation of a manga uh, superior to the source material?
I would say the one of the examples I can think of, I hesitate to say superior because I like to write by nature, but I also like visual medium, so I'm constantly having this conversation with myself. But when it comes to anime and manga, anime has a tendency to add filler. They have tendency to have certain arcs that weren't present in the manga. And while I understand why that has to happen, sometimes it can be a turnoff, but other times it can actually work a little bit.
Mhm.
And so I guess with an anime, you can have the most beautifully thought out, composed, dramatic, or intricately crafted action scene on a page that you want. Nothing. It very rarely does it compare to seeing it in popping color 3D. Actually move. You can't beat that with certain things. So
Mhm.
I think that's where anime can, I guess, quote unquote, have manga beat sometimes, because there's just certain things that it visually just appeals differently when it's moving in animated motion versus in 2D black and white ink on a page.
Mhm.
But on that same token, with a manga, just like with any other visual medium, it's not like, oh, 2 seconds a move and it's done. You can look over every line, you can absorb the image that you're looking at, and sometimes depending on the type of narrative that's being said, it can impact you better than it would if you just saw the dramatic moment that lasted a second or 2 seconds and then it's gone.
Yep. And then I guess so. One of the things is it's like a lot of times I'm going to use an example with the One Piece, not the One Piece, the One Punch Man
Yeah.
manga. So even though season one was great, if you put screenshots from season two next to the exact manga panel it's
Mhm.
adapting, a lot of people will, look and say, "Wow, the manga just looks so much better." And of course, One Punch Man season two has a lot of issues, but I think something to take into consideration when comparing the two mediums is when someone is sitting down drawing like a manga panel, they are able to put all that detail, all that shading,
Right.
like all those extra little features into that page. And with anime is a business as well. Like and it's a bunch of people. It's not just one person putting an image in their head like onto an exact thing.
Right.
It's kind of like an assembly line ish, where it's a bunch of people having to do a bunch of frames and whatnot, varying talents, things like that. And so that's why a lot of times like anime adaptations just won't look as detailed. Like there's not that cross hatching drawing techniques. I think of Junji Ito with this, where a lot of what was on screen in that anime was, like perfectly aligned with the manga,
Right.
one to one, but the manga just looks so much better. And it's because, when you're a manga artist, you're able to like have the time, like you still got to work at a certain pace,
Right.
but you have the time to go and put in all that detail and then move on to the next thing. Cause you don't have to worry about, you animating this scene and the guy next to you has to match what you're doing. And you don't want to make his life a living hell. And
Right.
so that's really just the way both mediums are produced, are why a lot of times manga art in general, even though it doesn't have color, it'll just look better.
And that's
Uh,
it's bringing up that, see, that segue is perfect because that's one of the greatest anime of all time, Akira, which
mhm,
the original manga artist and writer directed the film.
exactly.
So he was, and I think that's why that's a perfect example of one of the more well done and successful manga to anime adaptations, because the original guy, he knows his stuff. He crafted all these volumes of the manga. He knows how to design it and how it's supposed to look. So it was easier, but it made sense that the anime looked that good. And like you said, when you have a team who necessarily didn't create it and now they're having to reproduce this visual and this kind of movement, uh in a lot of ways manga is very cinematic already, which is what lends itself to being adapted to anime so well. So when you have a team that didn't create it trying to replicate that style in that cinematic way on paper, it leads to that, like you said, you hold them up side by side and, well, the manga's still better.
Yep. And then a good, like, I'm glad you brought that up, because like a good idea of like, because people are like, how can manga be cinematic? I encourage people to go and look at Akira Toriyama's magnum opus Dragon Ball Z. Like
Yes.
look at the manga, because specifically the way he panels action scenes.
Yes.
Like because paneling is not just, box, 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 next page. There's a way to like, even though you don't have animations like you do in anime, there are ways to convey motion in manga,
Yes.
whether it be how like this panel's at an angle that's bleeding right next into the next panel, and things like that. And One Piece is also really good at that as well. And so manga has its own way of being flashy, cinematic as much as it can be.
Right.
And then other times, so do you know Mob Psycho 100?
Yes.
So with that one, like the webcomic, manga, whichever one it was,
Right.
there are certain art styles like that one where it's a little odd when seeing on a manga and seeing it still,
It
but
is.
it works so well in motion. The Mob Psycho 100 anime, it's gorgeous. And like even if you like get a still frame, it's not all that impressive. Man, I cannot speak today.
No, you're good.
But some art styles just lend themselves so well to like because the simplistic faces just like kind of dot eyes and like a mouth
Yeah.
and then but like they just look so fluid whenever they move because those animators aren't having to redraw a bunch of details
Right. Right.
like that. And so that's why I remember someone mentioned the faces in Akira
Yeah.
look kind of simplistic, but then when you actually watch the movie, if you don't just like not just screenshot of Akira, like if you're watching a scene, the way their mouths and their animate like their facial animations, it's so expressive.
It is.
And like they're simple, like when they're still, but like when they're moving, that simplicity allows the animators more freedom to do a bunch of great stuff. And part of why the dub for Akira will forever be cursed is because the Japanese lip sync in that movie is so good.
It is.
Like the newer dub, like it did the best it can.
It yeah. I own the newer dub, so
I'll watch it like if I'm watching, with people that don't like sub or whatever, like then I'll watch the dub, but it's I don't even know how they did it. It was as if they were just like drawing over like real mouths or something.
they really did a good job, especially when you consider how sometimes that can be hit or miss, even with the Japanese lip syncing. But that one was immaculate.
Yeah.
Can't argue with it.
And then kind of going back to earlier when I mentioned that anime is a business,
Right.
it's uh so one example is even though One Piece is one of the most beloved and like famous manga of all time, you don't hear nearly as good things about the anime.
You don't.
That's like same with Naruto as well, because they're having to go week to week, like every week, putting out filler, just putting in something to like meet
Yeah.
their quotas, and like they have a bunch of different companies looking over their shoulders. While you have that with manga to an extent, like yeah, you have a deadline to reach and whatnot. It's not nearly on that same kind of like stress level because so a lot of people like when you're watching an anime, all of a sudden the animation's not good. You're like some people would be like, oh, what happened to the budget? A lot of times it's not actually like a budget thing because even if you threw a bunch of money at them, it's not going to make it look better. When it comes to the process of developing like animation in general, it's time.
Right.
Because like some of the best looking like anime episodes took 2 months to make one episode, and you uh, with the ones that are going week to week, they don't have 2 months to make a
Right.
single episode. And uh so what's a good example of this? um all right, so think of it like this: there's this triangle, right? And you can get something, it's fast, good, and cheap. You can have two, but you can never have all three,
Correct.
right? So if you want a product fast, it's not going to be cheap. Well, no, okay. If you want it fast and cheap, it's not going to be good. If
Right.
you want to cheap it, like if you want it cheap and good, it's not going to be fast. So it's that kind of triangle. And
Right.
more often than not, with the way anime production schedules are, they have to go with we want it fast and cheap because those money,
Typically.
like they don't have the money to make every episode look like a Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works episode.
Right.
If only. Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. But so that's kind of the thing you run into uh with anime. But and now kind of getting off just the visuals or aesthetics, look at the way stories are paced
Yeah.
between manga and anime. A lot of times, as long as you aren't a series going every week with a bunch of filler, and like those anime that catch up with the manga too fast and whatnot, in a proper and a lot of like really good anime adaptations, the pacing can actually be better than the manga
Yeah. It can.
because with uh, with the manga, so say there's a weekly series. Every Sunday, it's 20 pages, like it's a 20-page chapter. You have to pace, like you as a mangaka have to pace the series a certain way where it's a satisfying read each week.
Right.
And so you feel like you got a beginning, middle, end, not just like a snippet, like like a trailer or something, and then waiting till next week for another of what feels like a trailer of what's to come.
Right.
And so that's why a lot of times people complain that manga can just move way too fast. So, and this is especially the case with monthly series.
Yes.
Attack on Titan, for example, and a couple others like Blue Exorcist. A lot of those can people not so much Attack on Titan, but a lot of people have mentioned with like monthly series, it really does feel like the manga moves at a breakneck pace because once you get those like 45 chapters that month, you're waiting another like 30, 31 days before you get any more of that story.
Correct.
And so, you better make that chapter count. And
And
so,
like, yeah,
yeah.
I definitely think that's why I tend to gravitate towards anime more so than manga, just because sometimes I like part of the whole, I guess, narrative journey for me in any medium. I like the ebbs and the flows. I like the highs and the lows. So after I just had, you got Dragon Ball Z and you've got, first you're dealing with the 1, 2 androids, then you got to deal with the heart disease, and then there's like more android. I need a break at some point,
Mhm.
and that's where I was saying earlier, sometimes the filler works because it gives
Yeah.
you that break you wouldn't have if you were reading the manga. It would just be one catastrophe to the next, and it's like no respite. So
Mhm.
it's funny how that works. And but again, it's like it could go either way because some anime or some manga, when you translate it to anime, it actually works at that breakneck pace. It just
Mhm.
depends on the subject matter and honestly who's doing it.
Yep. And then a really great example of this is My Hero Academia. And
Another one I need to start.
it's good, man. It's really that good. But uh what was it? I think season 1 of My Hero Academia only adapted like the first 2 volumes and the beginning of the 3rd volume of the entire like 12 episode season 1.
Okay.
And like especially if you jump from the anime to the manga, when you're reading it, it just feels like it's going like super fast. Like what just happened? I didn't even process that. And then later, when things are happening in the story that call back to previous events, you're like, wait, what was that? And like looked over it, and so just kind of like that balance you have to deal with. But so the makings of a really good series, in my opinion, is yeah, even if the story is great, make me fall in love with the characters. Because if you make me love characters enough, I will be entertained watching them do pretty much whatever.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of the thing with My Hero. Yeah, it's moving at a slower pace, but like it wasn't noticeable and it felt just right. And it's like, okay, like over these span of like 12 half-hour episodes, I really feel like I'm knowing these characters a little more. I'm not
Right.
seeing them for one page and then they're gone for a little bit. I'm getting entire scenes with them, like hearing their music themes, which are a lot of times indicative of the character or the arc they're going through and things like that. So pacing is another thing that a lot of times anime can have the upper hand on
Yeah.
with manga. And then I guess I'm sorry I keep just jumping into examples a
Oh
bunch,
no, it's no, yeah, yeah, go go.
but did you ever read Full Metal Alchemist?
I never read the whole thing, but yes, I have read it. I was reading it actually concurrently when I started the anime, like when I was way younger. So I that one I got to kind of experience both at the same time, kind
Mhm.
of simultaneously. So I have that unique perspective on that.
That's a series I feel was overall like the manga at least is like even though that was like monthly chapters, I'm pretty sure it was, but it was paced really well.
Yeah,
And so Full Metal Alchemist had 2 anime adaptations.
it
It
did.
had one, it's just called Full Metal Alchemist that came
Right,
out
and then you got
not long after the manga started.
right.
And they
That's one I grew up on.
yeah, and that one they really kind of like I love those characters, but in those early episodes and like the filler episodes, it really feel like they're just going to a crawl.
Yeah,
Because some series like that, you need the story to progress to learn more about the characters.
correct.
10 minutes? Okay. And then uh when at the 5 minute mark we'll mention our businesses and whatnot, but I'll try to
That's
finish
hilarious.
up this
Yeah,
manga anime conversation soon. But with Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood,
yeah,
they had like that was the remake. They're like,
yeah,
okay, we
right, right,
had
right.
a chance go to start. They skipped over some things, but like that one felt perfectly paced as well. So I think
And
sometimes
yeah,
like anime that take their time coming out
hmm
after the manga,
hmm
I feel they generally do better because like they can look at the whole or at least most of the story and be able to pick out okay, like we can pace this out this much, we'll do this and that. And like with a lot of anime that are still going right now, that well, like the mangas that are still going and the anime, creators, they don't know how it's going to end. They just pace it a certain way and hope they're not shooting themselves in the foot by overlooking something too much or not
correct.
giving not giving enough time, things like that.
Or they just end and leave us all hanging. I'm looking at you, Guyver, and initially Inuyasha.
Ugh. Yeah, Inuyasha is my wife's favorite series. um
What's your
she's
take?
very happy about the new series coming out,
Oh,
the Yashahime, is that what it's called?
so yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's like half the I don't know, but yeah, overall, there are some times where manga they just get the pacing perfect.
correct.
As you need to progress the story to learn more about the characters, or sometimes when a certain thing's over, you can spend more time on just the characters being the characters, talking to each other,
So yeah,
like that. So, and then we're kind and oh, and speaking of anime that just ended, my examples, Dead Man Wonderland.
that's another one
That
that irks
they
me.
left out the whole. I'm not going to
Uh,
get into it. If you watch the show and you're holding your breath for a season two, don't
don't.
just read the manga. Just do it. And,
Yeah.
and then what's another one? Devil's a Part Timer. That was a good adaptation, but then they just stopped. There's no season two. They said there's probably not going to be a season two, and all we have is the manga. And so I don't know.
And
That's
then those are the ways that sometimes manga is superior because you
yeah,
got the rest. Let's just, like you said, dive into that.
yeah. And so we're about to wrap up here. We have like less than 10 minutes, probably about 5 minutes at this point. So we're kind of just going to end talking about our little, like our businesses a little more. And so like with the Geek Mansion, what is it that inspired you to
Well,
kind of,
honestly, initially, I didn't obviously I didn't have the page or the outlet, and I was just constantly posting like random comic book panels, manga, anime trailers, just randomly posting it on my personal page. And
Mhm.
I just I like to write. I've done some kind of light correspondence for some like third party websites, and I was just like, I can just do my own. I like talking about it enough, so
Mhm.
I just did it. I was kind of pushed more along because of my enterprising wife. She's the one that actually talked me more into making it like an official other thing. So I did, and I enjoy it. It's even though I'm kind of a geek about a lot of things or a
Mhm.
nerd about a lot of things, I know a lot of people aren't. So I try to appeal to the casual fan more because some of the more I guess gatekeep little
Mhm.
nerd kind of outlets are kind of they feel daunting. So I just wanted to be
Yeah.
the opposite of that.
Yeah, your page actually helped me because like with me trying to get my own kind of things done, I just lose track of what's being announced, what's happening.
Yeah.
Then I look into your page like, okay, caught it just like that. Cool. I don't have to watch I don't have to watch a 5 minute YouTube video where the
yeah.
last like 10 seconds they address the title. So
Yeah, that's it. That was the whole kind of genesis behind me doing that. So thank you for
yeah,
that.
your page is just right to the point, which is what I need, or else I'm just not gonna keep up. So and for us, the Neon Otaku, it's we're manga collectors. Like have been, at least I have been for most of my life. And when it comes to collecting manga and anime and whatnot, yeah, there are book chains like Books a Million, things like
Right.
that. We have like things here and there, and but we always have to like run around town, look around everywhere, do some ordering online,
Yep.
just to get what we're looking for. That, and we've talked Gotcha. And we've talked to with a lot of our friends and whatnot, uh like we've just seen a lot of people wishing, man, if only there was a place outside of the occasional convention that we could just go to hang out. And while we could, just open another online store, which we're going to do, we're going to have an online part of our store. Well, we could just like do that. There's already a ton of those to choose from. And so, like, kind of the big motivation of our store is Neon Otaku. We're going to be focusing on manga and anime.
Good.
Yeah, other places have that stuff, but we're gonna just like we'll have everything right here for you, and we'll reward you with stuff. I'm not gonna get into that whole spiel now, but and also at the same time, we're gonna have like a community area where people
Oh
can
yeah.
just sit down, hang out, talk about series, just walk in, uh like just walk, the experience of walking into a place, you see someone that you usually run into there, like a coffee shop or something,
Right.
and then you like, you just get into a conversation, you just end up talking all day, things like that. That's
Yeah.
what we want at our store. So you walk in, you get a manga, you see someone else reading manga in the community area, you guys strike up a conversation that you guys can just like sit in our chairs and talk about it all day if you want to. Like, we're not gonna shoo you out for just hanging out and whatnot. That's kind of our goal.
Sounds perfect.
And even though manga store is something I thought about for a while, I was always like, oh, I can't do that. It wouldn't work. It was thanks to my wife that she brought up like the same idea like sometime last year, and and I was like, yeah, I thought about it. I don't think we can actually do it. She's like, no, for real, let's do this. Let's make it work.
Shout
And
out to
so
the
I was like,
wives,
what?
man.
Okay, I'll we'll see what we can do. And then here we are now. We're getting closer to making things work, and yeah, it's just I'm glad I listened to her because we've actually gotten progress on it, and I was wrong. This is totally feasible to work and everything. So yeah. And then so just we're gonna go ahead and just kind of wrap this up. So I got a couple minutes. Where can we usually find you?
I am mostly active on my Instagram and Twitter. It's the Geek Mansion. Instagram at the Geek Mansion. Twitter is the Geek Mansion _. That's where you can find most of my stuff.
All right, awesome. And then how often do you usually post, by the way? Like, do you just
It
like,
depends what kind of news is breaking. I try to just whatever's like top, like, oh my God, this is huge. I try to get as many of those pumped out in a day as I can. It just
gotcha.
depends on day job workload and how fast the news comes in.
All right. Well, awesome. Guys, make sure you go check out the Geek Mansion. Awesome page. Convenient to keep up with. I don't have to deal with YouTube clickbait anymore. I got tired of that real quickly, but
Me too.
you're a better alternative. Us,
Thank you.
you can find us Instagram at the Nina Otaku. You can find us other places too, but that's kind of where we're putting most of our emphasis and effort into. And then I just want to thank WasabiCon
Yes.
and all of you guys. Thank you for giving us the opportunity for just to come on camera to just nerd out,
Yeah.
talk about anime, manga, comic books for a little bit.
Great
And
way to spend a Saturday.
it was great talking to you. I'll probably want to collab with you again. Figure
Oh
something.
yeah, we're definitely gonna link. We're gonna link.
All right, awesome. And then I don't know how to end this. How to
Nice.
end this section. So hopefully you guys can.
How do you want people to support you in the opening of the store?
For now, just follow our Instagram. That's honestly the best thing you can do for us because we'll be posting any announcements there, things like that. So Instagram really is the best way for the moment.
All right.
And we're just getting a couple last steps done, but hopefully we'll be open. I can't say it, but we have an idea when we'll be open. Yep. And we're good. We're pretty much wrapped up here unless you have anything else to say.
I'm good, man. It was good talking to you. It was good being a part of this, and I can't wait to link on something else. Like, it's dope.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right, no problem, man.